It is February the 14th, 2026. I'm Chris, and this is the future of photography.
The future of photography.
Welcome back. Here we are. Adrian and myself. Jeremiah is excused today. Lofik.
Hello.
Remember? Hello. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Thank you. Yes, I'm all right. As per our discussions before we hit the big red magic record button, my head is full of stuff today. It is all related to creativity and, in this case, the manipulation end of photography rather than the creativity end. Rather than the capture end of photography. And
have you been secretly partaking of the vibe coding a little bit?
I'm taking something. I don't know what it is. I'm taking something, and it's making my head spin. All will be revealed in a future episode of TFOP, which will be a show and tell, where I expose both my failures and my successes in the world of agentic AI manipulation of my photography, creation of art. Etc. 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 I'm having fun though. There is that.
That is good. That's not what we want to talk about today. We a few episodes ago we talked about LOFIC, the lateral blah 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 condenser. No, whatever. This thing. These new type of sensors that are supposed to come out this year in smartphones, 200 megapixels, 20 stops of dynamic range. Which is a lot.
Just wild. I think that's officially a lot of dynamic range.
It's officially a lot. And of course, if that comes to fruition, that will change a lot of things. And I want to talk about. So we got more stops. It's kind of the dream of a lot of photographers, right? Because we have cameras that cannot see everything in terms of brightness. You have to make a choice. You have to make a choice if you want to expose for the highlights or for the shadows or for the middle, and then some of that, like depending on the light conditions, some of that highlight might get lost or the blacks might turn into complete black. So you lose detail, and that.
And what if you didn't have to lose detail? This is the question, isn't it? So it was about, I think, 3 or 4 shows ago we talked about LOFIC, and we focused primarily on what it was and the technical side of it. Yeah. Today, I think, a bit more of an exploration of what you might do with it. I was like, I wanted to. I ended up with I'll start with a silly one, but maybe it's not a silly one. I wanted to be able to take a photograph of a rocket in space, and I want to be able to capture like the inside of the flame and the stars, right? Which clearly have very different light levels.
Might be possible with 20 stops of dynamic range. Now, of course, I mean, 20 stops is a ridiculous dynamic range. Our eyes don't do that, and. At that point, we do have HDR, okay? We have to make sure everyone understands. We do have HDR. It is there, but it takes multiple shots, and you have to do some work and some tone mapping and so on. So we do have it, and for a while, when it was new, it turned into a let's say a creative, a visual trend of the.
It did, yes.
Just being very
10
extreme.
Plus years ago now.
Yeah, and it's mostly gone again. Or I haven't really come across a lot of that. Now, my first question is: will availability of HDR, making it accessible to everyone and not just to the nerds who have the patience to play with a bunch of software and do a lot of tweaking and so on, will that kick off yet another round of that game?
It's an interesting one. I mean, when what was first called HDR first became a trend in photography, it was very much just sort of hyper realistic, for want of a better term, right? It's we weren't looking at images that were that a lot of the time that looked particularly real or particularly true to life as you would see them and interpret them as a human being. A lot of stuff was exaggerated. Now that's to be expected when tools are new, etc., etc. I did think, though, however, it was a masterpiece of marketing and the power of naming, because of course what you weren't doing is you weren't displaying high dynamic range. What you were doing is you were crushing high range into a very small range, so you could see all of your highlights and all of your shadows and all your whites and all your blacks, in a way that possibly was not very real looking. Since then, we've had the arrival of genuinely high definition or high dynamic range, I should say, screens. So modern smartphones, for example, have high dynamic range screens in them. They are able to show many, many more layers of brightness in a single image than traditional phones, computers, televisions, whatever. You can get HDR televisions as well. And so there now we can actually see HDR, at least a lot more range than we ever used to be able to on a screen. I haven't seen any HDR paper yet. It's not something I'm aware of.
That would have been my next question, because of course this is now, at this point in time, 2026, is limited to a limited set of screens, the HDR display. So not every screen can display HDR. There's still a bit of a technical format war going on, different kinds of HDR, the way it's saved and so on. But I don't think most people have to deal with that, especially if you are in, let's say, something like the Apple ecosystem, where this is all kind of integrated and it's taken care of for you. But as soon as you cross boundaries, it might become a bit more difficult, even though I think standards are now mainly established in this area. But you have the HDR screen, and yes, on a paper, white is the brightest part of a paper is the paper.
Yes.
You can't get beyond
very
that.
few printers have white ink in them.
Well, there are some tricks. There are some tricks where certain kinds of paper have fluorescent white in them. So when that is hit by UV light from the sun or from a light source, it comes out as more white. It is a bit brighter. It has, I don't know how much it is, maybe half a stop or a stop more dynamic range in that respect, but only under the right light. If you have a UV flashlight for some reason, some people doing like crafts work, those UV glues that harden under UV light.
Forensic scientists on the television have those, don't they?
That too. No, but they're becoming more common. But if you have one of those and you go to your bookshelf and you point at the books, you will have books from like 20, 30 years ago that will not look bright. And you have books that will jump at you. The paper will jump at you.
Yeah. Because
there was this change in printing for the paper to look more brilliant, for lack of a better word. So there are tricks there, but it doesn't even come close to anything HDR. So maybe instead of 4 stops, we now have 5 stops in paper or something along those lines.
So, okay, so let's park the presentational end of this, right? Because I think there's an element about the technology here and what the technology allows us to do. There's going to have to be some level of, image processing pipeline to get you to your output medium of choice, be it digital or analog.
Let's assume that part is solved.
Yeah, let's because otherwise, I mean, it is worth asking the question, what's the point? But I think that we're aiming for a positive answer to what's the point today, and the things that it would allow us to do that maybe that we couldn't do before. Stars were where I was at. I think possibly because I saw a TV program the other day that really jarred at me. It was set in central London. And it was a scene of a couple taking a walk through Trafalgar Square at night, and it was a sort of a romantic moment. They were madly in love, and they were walking through the city at night, right together. And it had stars in the shot. And I was like, that's just simply not true. There are no stars in London at all. Never have been as far as in my lifetime, because there's just too much light pollution, right? So you don't get to see the stars in London. And so it sort of jumped out at me as being a little bit odd and clearly composited. But I think there's some disciplines and some things that really might benefit from this, right? So astrophotography, for example. I mean, sometimes you need lots and lots of kit to track the stars and things, so that you can have your shutter speed slow enough, your shutter open long enough to capture enough light to get the stars to show, the Milky Way and things like that. When people do those kinds of photographs, what if you could do that just in a snapshot, because you could capture sufficient light? That would be nice. You're making a face at me now. I've got that wrong, haven't I?
Well, from a technical side, LOFIC doesn't extend the low end; it extends the higher end. That's the thing. So if you have the sun shining right at you, you might be able to capture most of that dynamics, but you will not get additional material at the bottom. But that completely aside from the technical discussion, I was also hoping that we could steer this discussion a bit into the aesthetics angle.
Okay, go for
it. And I'm not just talking at the over the top 10 years ago HDR that we've seen everywhere. But the question is, if nothing clips anymore, do we lose an important aesthetic constraint? Your dog says yes.
Dog says yes. So sorry that Jasmine always wants to be on the podcast. I don't know.
No worries. So the creative constraints of the medium is. We talked about this in last week, 2 weeks ago. I don't remember. About a look. A look of its time was always because of technical limitations and what we made out of those. And if you lose that important limitation, then, oh my God, what are we going to do? Are we lost if we can capture everything?
I think the removal of technical limitations can be an enabler, right? So if you try and watch any television made before 1995, right? Doesn't matter what media you watch it on. Let's say it's got some variation of 480 lines of information, and it's going to be small and fuzzy, right? And to our modern adapted eyes adapted for high resolution screens, that looks now quite of its time and of an aesthetic, and hence you get products like the new Fuji Instax video camera with an Eras dial, or an Eras dial that they call it everywhere apart from the USA, where they were afraid of Taylor Swift, so it's not called the Eras dial. No, that's why it's not called the Eras dial. That's honestly what nobody will say it. If you watch the reviews of this camera on YouTube, anybody in the United States will not call it the Eras dial, or the Eras dial, as we would say here in the UK, because they're afraid of Taylor Swift and they were told not to. And who wouldn't be afraid of Taylor Swift? She's very powerful lady.
I'm shaking.
So this is you get these looks and these aesthetics that come from different eras and that were grounded in the technology that was available at the time. So I think new technology and a new aesthetic, I think, is an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for us to go somewhere else and experience and make new things. So I like that idea. I it is an aesthetic thing, so it will be a subjective judgment, right?
It is, and it will also give you more freedom, which means that you will, in certain ways, not have to make decisions during shooting time, but you can make decisions later, which, of course, will will create this mountain of work when you come back home with your photos. But now you have, and the physiology of us, of humans, and the way we perceive and the way we build meaning in an image by looking at it has not changed. So we're still drawn to brighter areas, we're still drawn to more contrasty areas, and so on. So that will stay. That just the underlying technology will change. And if we look at, again, classic photography has almost relied on constraints, where things clip, where you crush the blacks, where you have your roll off between those different extremes and the rest of the image. And those constraints have, for lack of a better word, created a language, a visual language. And this extreme dynamic range, in the first step, removes that language, because we don't have to adhere to the perfect, exact exposure anymore. And we can now do things with these, or we will be able to do things like choose a key after the fact. As in, do I want this to be a high key or a low key photo? I can just make a choice. Same as I can now with a raw image choose my color balance without losing any quality.
I think that's the sort of thing that I'm looking forward to, right? So, and you see the beginnings of this stuff if you do things like HDR video editing in DaVinci Resolve or something like that, where you are actually capturing data, and traditionally, the scopes in a video editor will go from, they'll have brightness usually from 0 to 1024 or something like that, won't they? It'll be about, and you set your brightness values in photography speak. I guess it would be the basic tone curve that you set, but values for from 0 to 1024 for that. Now, if you've got HDR, 20 stops of dynamic range, and let's say it goes to 3,000 or 4,000 or something like that, you've got much more range to play with. And as you said yourself earlier, actually, because I'd got something wrong, all of that extra is at the top end, right? Black is still black, and we can already record no light. That's the easy end that's the easy end to do. Anybody, it's capturing the variation in brighter light at the same time as not losing the blacks as difficult. But I can picture choosing a range, right, and saying I want to, almost a new type of slider. Imagine if you looked across that and say, okay, I want to capture, I want to display in my image this range. Right, I want these out of my 4,000 luminosity values. I want to capture the middle 1,000 or the middle 2,000, and I want you to gracefully.
Wait, you want to capture, or you want to later work on the picture and only show those? Because the capture is
good point. I want to use only. I want to,
because it is important when we make decisions in photography. The decision. Doesn't make the dynamic range doesn't make meaning. The decision makes meaning in a photo.
Yes.
So you have to make that decision, and my motto is to make a decision earlier helps you with your photography rather than later. Because I've often run into analysis paralysis. I've often been very like sitting in front of a huge catalog of 5,000 pictures I brought back from a photo tour or something, and then, oh my God, what am I going to do? There's so much. There are so many. There are all the possibilities in front of me. What do I do? And the point in time for the decision is the one thing. And a really interesting thing that just before we started this recording, I talked to Monica about exactly that concept, and she's like, "Oh, you mean focusing?" I was like, "What do you mean what do you mean focusing?" Well, you make a decision where to focus in space, where it's sharp and where it's fuzzy. And this is kind of the focusing in the whole dynamic range. You focus somewhere, and you decide how wide, like how much your, in quotes, depth of field you want for that brightness range. Where's my black? Where's my white? I have all these possibilities. You have to make a decision. And then I thought further. Do you remember Lightroom? The camera that would allow you to take a picture and focus after the fact, which was not a success, which was not which ended up being a paperweight for most people who bought it.
Yeah, it was not a commercial success. I think in terms of technology experimentation, it was quite good.
It was interesting, but turns out, well, first of all, this thing was just not enough resolution, so that was a problem. Also, giving the viewer the ability to focus after the fact on the website also didn't really make a lot of sense because nobody wanted that. People want to lean back and just be presented with a curated range of photos, at least at this point. And so that would not be applicable here, but you would still have the ability to choose what range you want to show, or if you want to show the entire range and have nothing hidden in the photo, everything shows.
Well, I really like Monica's analogy there, or Monica's metaphor that you're focusing on the dynamic range. I think that's the depth of field of would you call it luminosity or just luminance or just brightness? Brightness is an easy plain English word. Yes, a brightness focus. I think that's a fantastic concept and a really nice way of putting it. Because you could do that. That would make sense to photographers as opposed to image scientists, right? As a photographer, I can totally get that I'm choosing to focus in on a range of things, right, and a depth of field. But in this case, it's a depth of field of brightness. I'm always torn between the concept of, do I want to do this all later or do I want to do it all in camera? At the moment, and the way that I approach photography changes over time. And it's a pendulum that swings for me. And so sometimes I want to be able to capture lots, and I go out and I capture lots of log footage video or something like that. And then I come back home and I've got hours of log footage video I have to process, which I then find a little bit challenging, maybe even soul destroying. Or do I try and burn it in a YOLO fashion, right? You only live once, burn it all into the JPEG and be done with it. 8 bits is enough for anybody, right?
which it usually is most of the time.
In an output format, 8 bits is usually fine. In an input format, 8 bits, has been proven, I think, reasonably well proven these days to be a little bit constraining. So what does a normal camera shoot now? Because I haven't bought like a high-end camera in years.
In the lab, we're talking 15, 16 stops. Yes.
Well, 15, 16 stops, but also 15, 16-bit RAWs as well, aren't it? 14-bit RAWs. I have no idea what mine shoots. I have a Fuji X-T3 still, so I'm now at least, I think that's still only 2 generations behind the current generation of Fuji. It's way enough camera for me. I do get tempted occasionally, and there'll be something that triggers an upgrade I find meaningful at some point in the future, of no doubt, right?
Yeah.
But I literally have no idea how many bits of raw data or how many stops of dynamic range it can capture.
I have a suggestion, and you know how you can have in filming, you can have a monitor attached to your video camera that has a LUT built in, or you can choose a LUT. You can choose a preview of what it will look like once you worked on it in whatever software you use. Maybe we'll need cameras that kind of simulate tasteful limits for where this range is, so it gives you a preview of what you might be able to do with that picture later on. Because I think perfect detail everywhere is not going to fly. It's not going to fly.
I worry, right? Do you know when you get a new television and it's on the factory settings, right? And one of the
Oh, the
factory
demo
settings
settings, yes.
yeah,
Mhm.
one of the settings does something like ignore the actual frame rate of the media we're watching, run everything at 60 FPS and interpolate the extra frames if necessary. Have you
Yeah.
ever tried to watch like a Hollywood movie at 60 FPS? Right, it looks like it's made of plastic.
There are things I do not do, and that is one of them. Yes.
Yeah, just
No.
like quickly, like where are all the 25 controls I need to get to actually watch the movie at the frame rate it was shot at, right? And stuff like that. So I think I think there's more opportunity here, possibly for younger generations of people who haven't grown up with a specific mental model of what dynamic range to expect on a screen. I think there's more opportunity perhaps in things like in still photography rather than moving photography, at least at first, about movies. Maybe high fashion photography, maybe art, maybe avant-garde art, not the sort of fine art where the sky has to be black and the clouds have to be white. I don't mean that kind of a look. I mean an actual art.
Is that in the
Right.
rule book
So
of fine art, where the fine art police comes and looks at the brightness of the cloud?
When I say that, it's a look that by my definition of it, it's a look that you can picture, right? And I'm not saying it's bad or good, right? I'm just saying that what I meant was, I don't mean that thing fine art when you have like a capital letters and when you see landscape photographers who are doing fine art prints and it has a certain look to it. I don't mean that. I mean like avant-garde art. I think where the object is perhaps to explore, rather than conform for a commercial sale, perhaps.
Yeah.
Discuss. It's difficult to tread that. I'm aware I'm treading a fine line. I might be offending lots of people. I don't mean to offend lots of people. What I'm trying to do is be clear in my descriptions.
Yeah, we are just winging this anyway, because we don't know what is going to happen when this becomes a technical reality. I just think we can agree that HDR is not going to be just a look anymore, but more of a moldable material, right? That you can mold into whatever you want. And then the resulting picture might be just looking exactly as another picture from 20 years ago, but you had all the tools to take it there from the imperfect capture that you made, because all the detail was in there. So
could be, yeah. I mean, I think it's
new visual worlds, or that,
in a good way, right? Because who knew what we would do with 40 megapixels? And when National Geographic said you only need 6 megapixels, and everybody started building 40 megapixel cameras, and now phones have 48 megapixels, and you think, well, what are we going to do with that then, right? But there's all sorts of things that people do with that technology and that capability. So
anyway,
it'll find its way.
It'll find its way, and I think we have delivered plenty of food for thought. So if anyone wants to be in on the discussion, we are on our Discord. It's linked in the show notes. You can talk to us about this, and of course, comment on the videos or things. But we still have a whole bunch of, well, actually 2 picks of the week in this context.
There's only 2 of us here, so
it's just the 2 of us. Let me fire up the first one that you supplied, and that is here. Well,
right. So this is a photographer with an astonishing body of work that spans at least 5 decades. Fashion, rock stars, movie stars. This I'm drawing out because I became aware he's got a new book coming out. He's in his 80s now, but famous photos of the Rolling Stones of Jack Nicholson in the snow when they were shooting The Shining. That photo of Steve Jobs, you know, the one where he's like stroking his beard a bit.
That's him. Okay.
Yeah. So, and as you see here on the screen here, you know, there's a thing. I sent you the link, because it said it'll just spin through on slideshow mode all of his photos. There's like over 1,000 photos just on his website.
You can just put this on the screen somewhere in the corner and just let it run.
I just chose a random 1,000 photos of ludicrously famous people and high art and fashion and stuff like that. And it's just fascinating. So, you know, I would recommend anybody to just dive in, and it's literally one of those portfolios you can just dive in and see all sorts of wondrous things.
That is amazing. So what I brought us is another DIY techie kind of thing. Doesn't have anything to do with high dynamic range, but you know how you can make an aperture out of, let's say, black cardboard, maybe cut a little star in it and put it in front of your lens, and then you look at point light sources, and in the bokeh you see the upside down version of that, the shape.
Yeah.
And that is kind of cool. And then a while ago we talked about this, I showed you this guy who does apertures and mechanizes them, as in they rotate, and they do other slit-shaped apertures that rotate, but with a little motor, which again does things. Here's another version of that. Here's a guy who has taken an LCD, a liquid crystal display, if you remember those. Okay. And the thing you can do with them is they are actually transparent. If you take the reflector or the backlight off and put a polarizing film in front of it, you can turn that thing transparent or black. So you can make a digital aperture. And that is a really interesting concept. So this is a video showing him doing that, making that with the tools that we have available today, which is 3D printing and microprocessors and things. And then he puts this in front of a camera and shows you like what it can do, as in, just put the aperture at any shape you like, at any location you like, or move it. In this case, a strip that goes side by side. And we are going to look at some photos here on the video that show what this thing does. And for example, it's almost a light field kind of thing. When you move that aperture side by side, you get a 3D look because you're looking through different areas of the lens.
Looking through different, yeah. That's
right.
That's fascinating. How's he programming this thing with a Raspberry Pi or something?
Yeah, definitely something like that. And I don't know, maybe he's vibe coding the software. I have no idea what he's doing there. But that is one application. So you can take pictures.
Crazy. I really like that. That's really interesting. You know, for people listening rather than just viewing. I mean, this is definitely one that is easier to describe to seeing it. But in real time, whilst the shutter is open, various different parts of the LCD are either being made transparent or are being blacked out, so that you can get different aperture effects.
But now look at the little flower petals that he put in the bokeh, because he can with the aperture.
Yeah.
And now you have these little rotating animated shapes in the bokeh.
That's really cool. I like that.
It is pretty cool. Yeah, it is pretty cool. And then you see a few examples of like there's a little attention sign that will now show in the bokeh, because why not? So you can integrate things in the bokeh that you couldn't before, and yeah, so that is my tip of the week.
Great options for subliminal advertising there, yes.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, here's another one. Look.
Suddenly I feel myself wanting peanut butter, and I don't even like peanut butter.
Let me put one more on the screen, because that is kind of animated rain in the bokeh. It looks like the Matrix.
It does. I was just going to say, it looks because it's green in the forest, right? Like coming through a green forest by the looks of it.
It's wild. So anyway, if you enjoyed anything of what we talked about today, or have thoughts about the infinite dynamic range that we're about to get in our phones, then and what that means for your photography, talk to us on our Discord. Find us on the tubes, and thefutureofphotography.com. Of course, we'll be back soon with more. Until then, everyone, take care and bye-bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Future of Photography. Join the discussion on our Discord, find the show notes and all episodes at thefutureofphotography.com, and subscribe wherever you listen to audio.